I just... Man, I know Shenmue 1 did really well back in the day with the impressive graphics and innovative gameplay, but I'm still shocked to see that it did well enough for a sequel. Like, in my opinion, the original Shenmue was just a lot of pretty graphics, for the Dreamcast anyway, along with a few interesting gameplay ideas, but not much else. It was the most expensive game to make around that time, and the money thrown at it certainly shows, but I really don't think it's a good game.
Well, enough people liked it enough for there to be a follow-up and continue from that teasing cliffhanger the first game did, which I still think is a pretty cocky move from director Yu Suzuki, especially since the sequel was already being made the same time as Shenmue 1. I've said this before, but if the first game in a series flopped because the creators were way too confident that it was going to do well, we would have either cried because we'd never get more of what we loved, or laugh at the developers for getting smacked down to the bottom. Whatever, that's a personal grudge anyway, and hey, who am I to tell these people not to write a little sneak peek of what's to come? There isn't really any development history for Shenmue 2 though. I can only assume the folks at Sega AM2 got as many funds to put into it as the first game, and the sequel was officially released in 2001 for the Dreamcast again, along with an enhanced port for the Xbox around 2 years later. I don't own the Xbox version myself, but apparently some graphical improvements were made with some added bloom here and there, on top of a full English dub that the Dreamcast version didn't seem to have for some reason. That's a pretty big exclusion there, considering that there were plenty of English-speaking players who loved the heck out of Shenmue 1. And besides, the English voice acting's hilarious, why would you get rid of that? The Xbox version also has a snapshot mode to take pictures whenever you want in case you're into that sort of thing, and it's in the HD re-release for PS4s, Xbox Ones, and PCs, which I believe are based on the Xbox port with higher resolutions. I'm once again using the PS4 version for this video.
Well then, shall we continue the adventures of young Ryo Hazuki and see what he's been up to since Shenmue 1? Are we to expect more weird gameplay decisions and awkward moments? Oh, you can certainly bet on that. Let's dive right into Shenmue 2.
So last time we saw Ryo, he was on a ship ride to Wanchai, Hong Kong and catch up to his father's killer, Lan Di. Shenmue 2 takes place literally straight after he arrives, and Ryo's current goal is to look for Master Li Xiaotao as instructed by Master Chen at the end of the previous game, since Li Xiaotao knows the whereabouts of another man, Yuan, who himself knows why Lan Di killed Ryo's father. One step into Hong Kong and Ryo's already being harassed by salesmen, and oh hey, I didn't know Chun-Li was in the game too. He also gets thanked by this random girl and her mother for being kind to the girl during the cruise. Who the hell are these two, and why are they getting so much focus within the first few minutes of the game? Well, it turns out in the Xbox release there were comic strips you could unlock in the extras menu by taking specific pictures, with one of them showing Ryo saving the girl from Chai. You remember him, the Golem dude. Those comics aren't in the HD version, so without that knowledge you're introduced to these total strangers who act like they know Ryo in some way, and then they leave just like that, never to be seen again. Well, this is definitely a good start, and I can see the voice acting hasn't gotten any better even with the additional waiting time for the Xbox version.
It's $50 a game, and the rule is...
Yeah, I know it all.
Do you want to play then?
You must be skilled. Okay, let's do it.
Characters sound just as unnatural as they did before, no matter how big of a role they play, though I think Corey Marshall, the voice of Ryo, has gotten slightly better since the first game. Don't get me wrong, it's still far from a groundbreaking performance, but when putting him back to back between both Shenmue games, you can tell he's improved at least a little bit.
Not yet, but if I go, it'll have karate.
It's about time you started studying for the entrance exams.
Yeah, I know. I was told to seek help in order to find young Dazu. Young Dazu knows why my father was killed by Lan Di.
Right, anyway, Ryo continues walking through the shops, but suddenly comes across Joy, who amusingly the Shenmue wiki refers to as a friendly woman, and yet here she is almost running into every single one of the townspeople just a hair away from injuring Ryo, and Joy has the gall to blame him.
Watch where you're going, you punk!
That goes for you too, barging into people like that.
Yeah, I'm with Ryo on this one, you tell that bitch. Alright, to be fair, she doesn't pull any more stunts like that throughout the rest of the game, but I'm not exactly a fan of Joy overall. Wow, that really makes me sound like an emo when I say that. Aside from her annoying voice, she's far too nosy and persistent for my liking, constantly getting up in Ryo's business and blasting her loud-ass music across this peaceful landscape. Very inconsiderate behavior. Oh well, moving on from that, Joy warns Ryo of thieves in the area, and immediately afterwards, Ryo gets his backpack full of money and the Phoenix Mirror stolen by a boy named Wong, which he gets back after a long chase, but the money's now all gone. Although the Phoenix Mirror is left untouched, the thieves didn't think it'd be worth something? That's a bit odd. After some looking around, Joy comes back to point Ryo towards a place he can stay for a decent fee without getting attacked in the middle of the night. This means during gameplay you'll have to earn money to stay for one night, either by selling your capsule toys you obtained in the first game, which I'll admit is a pretty neat feature, carrying a bunch of crates to their destination via QuickTime events with this guy making the weirdest grunt I've ever heard, or by convincing customers to play a game of Lucky Hit. It's just pachinko. You drop the ball and try to land in the winning pocket, and by God can it go on for a while, because you have to watch your opponents make their move too, and your profits turn up pretty small even with consecutive victories, so I'd recommend just doing the crates if you need to. Thankfully, you don't need to earn money to stay at the guest house for very long if you know where you're going, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Ryo eventually makes his way to Manmo Temple to visit Master Li Xiaotao, but he's told he's not able to see him until he learns the 4 Wudu, which are needed to master his martial arts. Though I swear with the way Ryo's written it down in his journal, it looks like he needs to search for the 4 nudes. Excuse me, do you know where I can find the 4 nudes? I see. Slowly but surely, Ryo gets taught about each of the 4 Wudu through different people. One is to train every day, one is to keep calm and judge your situation correctly, one is to not recklessly show off your fighting moves, and one is to act without hesitation and do what's right. All of this cleverly being shown through gameplay as well as being told. Sure, aside from the last Wudu, which is done as a normal combat scenario, the other 3 are portrayed in quick minigames, but they managed to get the point across pretty well, especially the Wudu involving correct judgment, where you have to go against your natural instincts and ignore the QuickTime event that pops up. That's actually a very smart way of showing it, even to this day with QuickTime events being spoon-fed to us all the time. After learning the 4 Wudu, Ryo returns to the temple to try and speak with Master Li Xiaotao again, but the man inside says we need to clean the soot off the walls first, and as you can see, Ryo does a bang-up job with it. Finally, Master Li Xiaotao shows up in the flesh, revealing to instead be a woman named Xu Ying, but she's reluctant to help Ryo because she believes he's just after vengeance and nothing else. Fun fact, the lady that voices Xu Ying is also the same one that voices Joy, and who did she go way too far trying to make each voice distinct. When she's Joy, she's upbeat, energetic, and full of life, as much as she can be with this game's acting standards anyway, but when she's voicing Xu Ying, she couldn't sound any less bored if she tried. It's kind of fascinating, really.
If I were the person upon whom you sought revenge, you'd already be dead.
Well, even though Xu Ying won't tell Ryo about Yuan just yet, she will at least help improve his kung fu skills and even offers to let him stay at her place for free in exchange for carrying piles of books from the temple's library each morning to air out the pages. Pretty sweet deal. And this means we no longer have to build up our funds just to spend a night at the guest house. Bringing the books over works exactly the same way as carrying crates. Just press the right button when prompted and try and transport all the piles before noon, though the only reward is a new combo I will most likely never use. Over the next couple of days, Ryo learns techniques to not only improve his kung fu, but also keeping his mind calm, which earns him the key to Yuan Dazu's book hidden in the library, which mentions the name Sung Ming Zhao, who Lan Di spoke of just before he killed Ryo's father. There's also a piece of paper that drops from the book acting as a clue to Yuan Dazu's whereabouts. Ryo takes this to the woman that taught her one of the Wudu, and she explains that the paper shows a Chawan sign, a code that means you're allies with Yuan Dazu. Ryo heads back home for the day, but sees that Xu Ying's feeling a bit down after looking at an old photo of her and her brother Shiming. Later in the game, there's a flashback that shows Shiming feeling a deep hatred towards the person that killed his and Xu Ying's parents and swore vengeance on them, much like how Ryo's feeling about Lan Di. There were theories that he could be one of the Chiyu Men leaders because of that, but Yu Suzuki has disproven this since then, though it is possible he's at least a member. We don't learn any more about him in Shenmue 2 or 3 anyway, so I suppose we can just leave it for now. The next day, after Ryo takes more books over to the tables, Xu Ying's assistant named Shun comes in to give him some tea and exchange in small talk.
Is something wrong?
No, I thought you looked a lot like...
I look like someone? Who?
A cat.
A cat?
There was a cat near my house.
You're saying that I look like a cat?
Well, no, just your eyes.
Same thing. Thanks a lot.
Hey!
Blah! Huh?
Well, that added a lot. After displaying the Chawan sign with teacups in various restaurants, Ryo manages to score big with one of them, as he's quickly passed down a note to meet in another diner at 8 p.m. Oh crap, it's still the middle of the day though. I'm gonna have to awkwardly stand around for a long time again. Christ, this is gonna be boring. Oh, thank Jesus, I can skip the waiting time!
There is a God after all.
Oh man, you have no idea how much of a lifesaver this is after the first game. No more checking on your phone or playing another game while you're waiting for that slow-ass clock to move just so that you can progress through the story. It's just one button and then boom, time skip. True, there are a couple of rare instances where you might still need to hang around like you're dead inside, but 95% of the time you don't have to wait anymore, and it is so good. Sorry, I got a little too excited there. Once it's 8 p.m., a man by the name of Shu King Zhang enters the diner and tells Ryo that he serves under Yuan Zhu. But before we can get any answers, Zhang immediately gets kidnapped by a group of thugs and we need to chase after them. After some honestly pretty badass fighting from Ryo, okay, most of the time, a sneaky assailant appears behind him and oh god, I hate these kinds of QuickTime events. Yeah, Shenmue 2 brings back the QuickTime events from the first game, which like before work fine, but the second game introduces these new QuickTime events requiring multiple button presses and they suck. The timing is so damn strict and I'm never sure if I'm supposed to hold down the buttons or tap them in rapid succession, and even then it doesn't work half the time anyway. Luckily the checkpoints are never too far away if you fail them, but these parts can still bite me. Anyway, once you pass that particular QuickTime event from earlier, Ryo trips over the attacker. This is Yuan, and she is undoubtedly the best character in the game for me. Oh, not because she's a deeper, complex person, but her mannerisms and especially the acting is so hammy, so deliciously over the top that she cracks me up whenever she's on screen.
Guys, get him!
Fabulous. I've got something to look forward to.
No, this thing stinks. I'll get you someday!
What's going on?
Yeah, again, I'm with Ryo on that one. What exactly was the direction for her? And wouldn't you know it, Yuan's also voiced by the same lady that does Joy in Shuying, so can she keep up that performance? Because this is wildly entertaining.
Zhang is rescued nevertheless and sits down with Ryo to tell him to search for another dude named Ren of Heavens, a rival of another guy called Don Yu, the leader of the infamous Yellowheads, who also happens to be searching for Yuan Zhu. Find Ren of Heavens and he may have some information. The next day, Ryo starts his investigation and is being kind of a dick to Shuying because she's concerned he's going to walk the path of evil by avenging his father, to which Ryo says, "Buzz off, lady, I'll do what I want," and then that's that. Guess all that training we did earlier to keep calm did absolutely nothing. After looking around the warehouses, Ryo comes across some of Ren's minions who we have to beat up for a bit, before they take him to another ambush and he gets the crap kicked out of him, even though I was at max health and dealing with them fine. Ryo gets knocked unconscious despite that, but is rescued by Wong, allowing him to sleep on the boat should he need it because I'm sure Shuying's not gonna want to have you back, you damn idiot. Wong also gives Ryo a lighter with the heaven symbol to prevent them from being too hostile, and as you can see, it's working wonders. Eventually we come to Ren's hideout, but the guards won't let him in until he pays $500, and oh boy is it going to take some time to get that much money. I already mentioned a few ways you can earn cash, but the easiest and fastest way to get the $500 are either beating someone at arm wrestling, or stepping into a fighting ring against this big fella. I chose the latter personally because I discovered I can keep abusing this one move that's fast enough and inflicts decent damage. The arm wrestling requires a shit ton of button pressing that will no doubt cause your arms to ache. At least it does with me, because do I look like a strong man to you? And for both minigames, the more times you win, the more money you can earn in the next round, but the harder it is to achieve victory. Unless I continue to spam this one move in the fighting ring, but even so there's a max cap of money you can win anyway, which means you've got to do more rounds. I suppose now's as good a time as any to go into the new gameplay additions, though truth be told there's not much. We already talked about the time skipping earlier, but you also have a map system now to find your way around more easily, which is a godsend when looking for specific districts. But you'll need to purchase the maps in each quarter first for a relatively cheap fee. This alone makes exploration a lot less of a hassle than in the first game, but if you do still end up getting lost, then you can once again ask any of the locals, who are way more helpful than they were last time, as some of them will actually give you clear directions, or they might even take you to your destination themselves. Sure, they walk at a snail's pace, and in some cases it might be faster to just find it yourself, but if you want a guaranteed way of getting to where you want to go, this is it, and I'm grateful for the inclusion. Nice to see Ryo saying thank you for once as well, unlike the original Shenmue. There's also a lot more combat placed in between the story and running around everywhere, working exactly the same as it did before, with all of the moves you learned in the first game carried over, and the enemy's health can even be seen on the bottom right now. The amount of fights you engage in still isn't fantastic, it's more like moving up from having 10% combat to 30%, but that's more than the original at least. There are a few puzzles, so to speak, to break things up, just like the last game, but they're again mostly just searching around a single room and looking for the right things to interact with. Nothing amazing, but I guess they're harmless. Honestly, even with all of the new additions and extra battles, I still don't think the gameplay comes close to being necessarily good. Most of your time is again spent just walking around talking to many different NPCs, figuring out where you're supposed to be heading next. And that's never going to be all that fun to me. But it is so much less painful to do than it was in the first game, making for a slightly more tolerable experience. Only slightly. If I had to put up with gameplay design like this, I'd rather have it be done this way than what we had previously. Well, after winning the same battle against the large dude over and over again, I got the $500 and now we can pay to see Ren, looking more like a pirate than a gang member. Rio gives him the money, but Ren tricks us and I failed another one of those stupid multi-tap QuickTime events. So Rio gets knocked out again, but thankfully we don't need to get another $500 for another chance to see Ren. We chase him down for a bit with QuickTime events aplenty, until he's worn out and tells Rio that Yuan is in Kowloon, wanting to come along because he smells riches. Rio gets ready to leave, saying goodbye to as many people as the player wants, finally ending with Shu Ying, who teaches him another move, and we get that flashback about her brother we discussed earlier. We head into the rather pretty sights of Kowloon, and Rio gets shown Ren's hideout as his new place to stay until Yuan is found. Ren proceeds to escort him to an herb shop where the owner tells us that there's yet another guy who might know where Yuan is after giving him the right password. We head on over there but get ourselves ambushed again, this time by Dong-Yu, the same leader of the Yellowheads that hates Ren's guts. Both Rio and Ren get locked up and handcuffed, but they manage to trick the guard into opening the door so that they can knock him out and escape, as we tackle more QuickTime events while Ren tells us where to go and we have to coordinate with him. An old setup, but a classic one nonetheless. They hide out on the rooftop overnight, but by morning they almost get immediately caught up by Yuan and more of her goofy acting.
I'll rip you into pieces.
Then followed by Dong-Yu as he chases Rio and Ren down, before leaping on top of another building and getting away. Wang unpicks the cuffs from the two of them as they go back to the herb store owner demanding to know where Yuan is. Bet you can't guess what's going to happen next. They need to meet with another guy, this time called Huang, but all Rio can find in his room are a bunch of cassette tapes, and they actually do a whole montage sequence of Rio checking every one of the tapes with background music that I can't help but just love. At the end, it all comes down to one last tape that you can choose to listen to in its entirety if you wanted to, going on for 11 damn minutes without fast forwarding.
Let me hear it again.
Oh god, no, it took forever to listen the first time. Turns out Yuan has Zhang captive anyway, which means Rio and Ren need to search for him as quickly as possible before Dong-Yu finds out. After asking around some more, the two find Yuan and stalk her for what feels like a long-ass time, until we break into her room and rescue Zhang again. He directs Rio to an old rickety building where we'll finally encounter Yuan, but his room's of course at the very top, so we'll need to cross these flimsy planks of wood to reach the other side of each floor. And by god, do not fail any of these QuickTime events. If you mess up even once, you're back all the way at the bottom and forced to start over again. This is the only time in the game where the checkpoint is way too far away. And you know, Rio, maybe if you didn't jump onto the unstable piece of wood holding you up, you might not lose your balance. And just to rub salt on the wound, Ren manages to make it up here quite easily.
Ren, where did you come from?
I ran down a tip from a snitch around here and got the key for the elevator.
Yet again, Rio was speaking for the audience on this one. It's like even he knows this is complete bullshit. He's starting to grow on me a little.
After entering Yuan room and looking for the right keys, we unlock a secret hideaway spot where the man himself at last makes an appearance, only to be found instantly by the Yellowheads as he gets captured, while Rio gets thrown out of a window and has to battle more enemies, followed by Dong-Yu, but he proves to be too much for Rio, even though again I'm doing okay on the fight. Rio was unconscious once more regardless, but Shu Ying suddenly arrives to take on Dong-Yu, taking Rio back to a nearby chapel and explains to him about her brother and his motives for revenge. Rio continues to say balls to that and heads back to Ren's hideout where Joy, oh yeah, I forgot to mention she made it to Kowloon too, finds out that Yuan Dazu's been taken to the Yellowhead hideout. Zhang then says that Dong-Yu was ordered by Lan Di to fork Zhu over to him, so he needs to be rescued as soon as possible. But Wang tries to stop Rio from going because it's too dangerous, leading Rio to say this to him.
I have to go. A real man would understand.
What does that have to do with anything?
Unfortunately, when we make it to the Yellowhead building, all of the entrances are guarded, so Rio uses the Chawan sign again, this time to meet with a friend of his father's, Kai, who first teaches him to fight with his other senses if he has no sight. We actually came across Kai earlier while looking for Yuan, but the most we knew about him was that he was blind and played his instrument in town, so it seems fitting that he would be the one to help Rio learn to use more than his eyes. Except it turns out Kai's not really blind, and it's never explained why he was putting on the facade. I feel like they had something going here, but simply having Kai be able to see after all kinda defeats the lesson they were trying to make. Being blind meant that he would have had to spend his entire life discovering these techniques all on his own. That sounds so much more powerful that way, but whatever, we don't see him again after this scene, so let's move on. Kai tells Ryo that he can get into the Yellowhead building by impressing this scout looking for skilled fighters. So let's of course ask some of the townspeople where we can participate in street fights.
Do you know a place where I can participate in a street fight?
In this vicinity, there are 4 places.
And they not only know where these street fights are being held, but they don't mind casually telling this random stranger where to go fight other strangers like it's a friggin' tourist attraction. How much of a common occurrence is this for them?
So we tussle around with a few of Kowloon's talented fighters while the scout watches, and we apparently have much kung fu, okay? Afterwards, the scout approaches Ryo and asks to meet with him later tonight at the appointed destination. He does just that, as the scout then says we'll have access to the Yellowhead building if we defeat 3 of Kowloon's best fighters, but we need to gather some more money to enter each of the tournaments they're in. And you know what that means. Lots of gambling, selling, whatever you need to do to get that sweet dough. This time we also have a few more fighting rings to take part in, all with different ways of winning, so it's down to preference in the end. But for me personally, the fastest and easiest one was catching this evasive acrobat, which only takes a few seconds as long as you keep dashing forward and spamming the grab button. I accidentally got around $1,000 in this playthrough when I only needed $500 to access one of the tournaments, as the prize money you get is enough to enter the next one. The battles against each of the fighters can be a little tricky, interestingly replicating the same movesets as some of the Virtua Fighter characters, but they're not too bad. Except for this one against a cowgirl that decides to throw in a QuickTime event at the very last hit, which if you lose you'll have to start the whole fight again, friggin' cheater. This girl's pretty sadistic too. We see her straight out kill a guy moments before by throwing him into a pit, but Ryo saves her from suffering the same fate. And damn dude, how strong are you? What does she weigh, next to nothing? Anyway, we defeat the 3 fighters and the scout gives us a hand-drawn map, something this series really likes to do so far, to a secret passageway that leads inside the Yellowhead building. We get inside and fiddle around with the world's most awkward to use elevators that seem to spread pretty far across Kowloon, and boy howdy does it take a long time to reach Yuan Zoo, who's on the 17th floor. There's some sneaking, more QuickTime events, combat scenarios, walking on beams. Yuan returns with a goddamn chainsaw, Jesus Christ.
You aren't getting away!
She really is the best. We get away from her, but then we're pursued by Dong-yu, who ends up getting stuck in the floor below, and holy shit, Ryo actually throws in a decent quip.
I've gotta get moving. Bye.
It's not much, but I kinda like that. It gives Ryo a bit more personality than just grumble, grumble, Lan Di, grumble, grumble, my father, grumble, grumble, Yuan Zoo. Shame that's the only time he does that, though. Better savor it while you can. Yuan finds us again, however, and we have to escape from her a second time. And after deflecting her chainsaw, she decides enough's enough and uses her fists instead.
This time, I'll use my hands!
I call this move the standstill Mario jump. What the hell is that? Whoever created this character, God bless you.
Ryo defeats her in another battle. Ren handcuffs her to the elevator. She explains that Zoo is now on the 40th floor. Ren kicks a bucket of garbage onto her, inciting her fear of dirty things. And that, unfortunately, is the last time we get to see Yuan. What a riot she was. Ryo and Ren have to split up after that as more of the Yellowheads get closer to them. Ren says he'll hold them off while Ryo continues looking for Zoo. There's a rather irritating section that follows where you have to keep checking all of these doors until you find the right room holding a key to a nearby elevator. Some of the doors leading to more goons waiting to fight you, and it's all done in a time limit. The doors you've already checked do thankfully still get marked even if you run out of time, so that's at least a bit generous. After that, right the hell out of nowhere, there's this random martial artist on one of the higher floors that seems to have kidnapped Joy, and he challenges Ryo to a fight to win her back. This dude is definitely one of the toughest foes in the game. He's very quick on his feet and hurts a fair bit, and annoyingly, just like the cowgirl from earlier, you can only end the battle by successfully passing the QuickTime event after depleting his health. You lose, and you guessed it, you do the fight all over again. We beat him anyway, and Joy is rescued. Hooray! She says that she and Wong both came into the Yellowhead building to help Ryo, but not only did Joy get captured, Wong has been taken to the 40th floor along with Yuan Zoo. We almost make our way there, dealing with more of the Yellowheads and these jokers who think coming at Ryo one at a time is more effective than going in all at once. At the rooftop is Yuan Zoo and the most silent helicopter in existence, carrying the one and only Lan Di, the man Ryo's been swearing vengeance on since the last game. but he quickly starts flying away after seeing both Wong and Zhu being saved from the clutches of Dong Yu and his henchmen. This leaves the fat bastard steaming mad as we partake in one final boss battle that I was actually struggling with a little bit, and yet again it all ends with a group of QuickTime events that you can't afford to screw up even once. With one last blow, Ryo defeats Dong Yu. He and Lan Di exchange deadly glances without uttering a single word to each other, which I'll admit was pretty cool, and he escapes to live another day. Back at Ren's hideout, Yuan Zhu tells everybody that Lan Di killing Ryo's father was in fact revenge on his part, and that his real name is Long Sun Sao, the son of Sun Ming Zhao, the name that Lan Di mentioned that very day, believing that Ryo's father murdered his own father. The Phoenix Mirror Ryo's been holding was also the same one owned by Sun Ming Zhao, and Zhu explains that if it's combined with the Dragon Mirror that Lan Di stole, the treasure needed to revive the Qing dynasty will appear. While one mirror may not be enough, there is a clue that leads to Bailu Village based on the stone that was used to make them. Ryo parts ways with everyone before he sets to Bailu Village, right where Lan Di is also said to be heading. Say, wasn't Guizhong supposed to meet with us after the last game? Whatever happened to him? Now, you'd think this would be where the game ends to tease the third Shenmue like what they did in the original, but there's actually one more section in Guilin as we make our way to Bailu Village. And damn, man, this place looks gorgeous. Yeah, I know it's just a bunch of polygons, but look at the greenery, look at the scope, look at the colors. All of this is being run on a tiny little Dreamcast. These are very impressive capabilities for a forgotten console. It sadly starts to rain though as we keep moving forward, but Ryo then notices a fawn caught in the river stream, and this is where we finally get to meet the girl from the original Shenmue that we only saw in Ryo's dreams and right at the very end as a small teaser. She jumps in to try and save the fawn, but Ryo dives in straight after to rescue them both. They manage to make it to shore, and the girl reveals herself as Shenhua Ling, telling Ryo she can guide him to Bailu Village since it happens to be her home. And this is where the story loses me, because from here on out is a bunch of walking through this giant forest, with Ryo and Shenhua talking about themselves, engaging in more QuickTime events to avoid the treacherous plant life and hopping across rocks. There's a cliff they gotta climb, numerous forks in the road, very thin rock bridges that you can easily fall off of. How often does she come down the other way that this doesn't scare her? Either way, Bailu Village takes a lot of time to get to. I'm not even kidding, from getting off the boat to reaching the end credits takes 2 whole hours. And that was with me skipping some of the optional questions you can ask Shenhua during your walks. It takes so long to travel to this damn village that Ryo and Shenhua need to camp out at one point. And there's this little section where you have to collect firewood so you can both sit around and talk some more if you wanted to. Then the following day, there's more walking, more talking, more exploring. There's a spring, I guess. A pile of dandelions blow into the air, and back to more talking. How did we quickly go from knowing nothing about Shenhua to suddenly knowing every tiny detail about her? Oh, and we have to stop by her house now because it's gotten late again. Good lord, it's been a 2-day hike now. How much further is this godforsaken place? We get to know why the game's called Shenmue, though. It's based on a tree. It's a very pretty tree and seems to hold great meaning to Shenhua since her parents named her after its leaves, but why did it need to be the game's title? It's never mentioned again in either this game or Shenmue 3 as far as I can remember. The only other thing we know is that the Shenmue tree is supposed to protect Shenhua in some way. How strange. So anyway, Ryo and Shenhua have some dinner, and just before they go to bed, Shenhua says that her father might be able to tell them more about the Phoenix Mirror at the stone pit near Bailu Village. In the morning, they carry on their journey and reach the stone pit, with Shenhua's father nowhere to be found, but deep inside they find some bizarre contraptions that reveals 2 giant replicas of the mirrors, and that is where Shenmue 2 finally ends. I should note that there is also a bad ending if you take too long to finish the game, I believe until July 31st, where Lan Di finds Shenhua and presumably kills or kidnaps her. Whew, that was a doozy. For as slow as Shenmue 2 got, however, there was much more going on in the story than in the original. And yes, I still don't think this is a very good game overall, but it's way more bearable than the first one to me. Especially since this is again very fun to riff with friends and family if you enjoy that. The new gameplay features like time skipping, a map system, and more competent NPCs are very much appreciated and definitely part of why I think Shenmue 2 was better than the first game, but at the end of the day, you're still doing the same thing as before. No matter how many things are introduced, I don't find any enjoyment in aimlessly running around trying to search for the next clue by talking to every single person I see. That's kind of Shenmue's thing though, which if you like it, good on you, but it's not for me. I personally only play these games for the unintentional hilarity. Is it an awful game? I wouldn't quite say so, especially when compared to Shenmue 1. There are a few surprisingly clever moments, and I even kinda like the frenemy relationship between Ryo and Ren, but I definitely don't see myself spending hours upon hours replaying Shenmue 2. It's still a bad game overall in my opinion, but not quite as bad as last time.
That already leaves us with one last game in this series, the sequel that took 20 years to see the light of day, but we'll save it for another time. I'll spare any more waiting for this because we've got to head back into Persona territory, except it isn't even a Persona game this time. I'm doing it at long last. Next time, I'm finally looking at a Shin Megami Tensei title with Nocturne. Hope to see you there. Thanks everyone for watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of yourselves. Shall we continue the adventures of young Ryo Hazuki and see what he's been up to Shenmue? See what he's been up to since Shenmue. I can't say that. Are we to expect more weird gameplay decisions and awkward moments? Oh, you can certainly bet on that. We've got to head back into Persona territory, except it isn't.